Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to do a little something different with a Monster Monday. Stick with it. Now guys, you know, I'm a Dungeon Master in D&D. I'm also a player in D&D. Today is going to be a Monster Monday. Now, I'm calling it Monster Monday because the video is going to be released on a Monday, but it's not going to be a series. All I'm saying is that we're doing a monster today, and not really a monster, more of a category of monsters. We're going to look at swarms. Now, swarms are listed in the monster manual on page 337, 338, and 339. Now, the options listed in the monster manual are swarm of bats, swarm of insects, swarm of poisonous snakes, swarm of quippers, swarm of rats, and swarm of ravens. Now, today, in my D&D session, I used a swarm of bats. Against my players. I'll bring it up closer, put it in front of me so it focuses on that. I used a swarm of bats against my players. And then, of course, you got the variant of the insect swarms with the swarm of beetles, swarm of centipedes, swarm of spiders, and then swarm of wasps. Now, the nice thing about all of these here swarms is they vary in challenge rating. Anywhere from 1/4 to the highest, I believe, is 1, which is a swarm of quippers. And the nice thing about swarms is all swarms have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Now, at low levels, this can really mess with your players. Now, when I threw the swarm of bats at my friend Todd and my friend Dustin, I threw these guys at him. Todd was swinging his short sword through these bats. Swinging his short sword through these bats, and he was rolling good on damage, and he was like, why am I not doing that? And I described it as, you're swinging into this swarm, and you're only hitting like a couple of bats at a time. And he, you know, he's obviously visibly frustrated because this isn't a tough battle for the level 2 party. For the 2 level 2 characters, they're facing a swarm of bats and two Exvarts, which Exvarts I'll do a video on later. But he's getting frustrated because he's like, I'm swinging and I'm not connecting with these things. And like I told him, I said, you know, you're just not hitting all of them. And the nice thing about swarms is all of the immunities, resistances that they get. The immunities and resistances. Now, I used the swarm of bats. Swarm of bats gets damage resistances to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. They have conditioned immunities to being charmed, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, or stunned. So if you have a monk in your party and they have stunning strike and you're getting tired of them stunning everything, throw a swarm at them. It's not going to be a hard challenge for them really, but it'll be enough to like bother them a little bit. Now, and of course, swarm of bats have echolocation, so they can't use their blind sight, which they have a 60 feet blind sight and a passive perception of 11. They can't use their blind sight if they're deafened. They also have keen hearing, which gives them advantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on hearing. And they have the swarm, so swarm, they can occupy another creature's space and vice versa. And the swarm can move through an opening large enough for a tiny bat, and the swarm can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. They can bite, of course. They have a +4 to hit for the swarm of bats. Their reach is 0, so they have to be engulfing the creature. And it has to be a hit is 2d4 piercing damage, or an average of 5. Or 2 piercing damage, or 1d4, which is an average of 2 piercing damage, if the swarm is at half of its hit points or fewer. It's almost as if, like, when you're slicing through, you're cutting down bats, and that's why it's doing less damage to you halfway through. And I described the swarm when the swarm engulfed Todd's character, Kieran, who is a Arakakra Ranger. I described it as you get overcome with this just the black swarm of bats, and you can't really see through it. Now, the swarm of insects, the interesting thing with the swarm of insects is there's variants, but we're going to do just the basic swarm of insects found on page 338 of the Monster Manual. Okay, they have an armor class of 12, hit points of 22, Also, I forgot to mention, the bats have a armor class of 12 and a hit points of 22 and a flying speed of 30 feet. Cool. The swarm of insects, they have a speed of 20 feet and a climbing speed of 20 feet. They have a hit point of 22, and they have 12 hit points for natural armor. They have damage resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Condition immunities to charmed, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, and stunned. They have blind sight of 10 feet, and a passive perception of 8. They have the same swarm ability as the bats, where they can enter another creature's space or vice versa. And they have a bite attack, which is a +3 to hit, and on a hit, if the swarm is at full health, it does 4d4 piercing damage, or an average of 10. And then on half health, they do 2d4, which is an average of 5 piercing damage. Now, the nice thing about the insect swarm is you can do... the swarms make things a little more interesting, because you can... The variant swarms, I'll go over those now. You have the swarm of beetles, and they have a burrowing speed of 5 feet. You have the swarm of centipedes, which... A creature reduced to 0 hit points by a swarm of centipede is stable, but poisoned for an hour, even after regaining hit points, and paralyzed while poisoned in this way. So if your swarm of centipedes drops someone down to 0, they are paralyzed when they get back up. Swarm of spiders, they have the spider climb ability, which means they can walk up walls, upside down walls, totally fine. They have web sense, so they know exact location of another creature when in contact with the same web. And they have the web walker, so they ignore movement restrictions caused by webbing. It makes sense for spiders. Now you have the swarm of wasps. The swarm of wasps have a walking speed of 5 feet and a flying speed of 30 feet, and they have no climbing speed. So there's the insect swarm. And now the swarm of poisonous snakes. Now it has an armor class of 14. The swarm of poisonous snakes actually has a CR of 2. The swarm of bats was a CR of, I believe, the CR of 1/4. The swarm of insects was a CR of 1/2. And now we got the swarm of poisonous snakes, which is a CR 2. Now the swarm of poisonous snakes has an armor class of 14, and it has 36 hit points. It has a speed, like a slithering speed of 30 feet, and it has a swim speed of 30 feet. Once again, damage resistance, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage, and it condition immunities to charmed, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, stunned. Blind sight of 10 feet and past perception of 10 feet. They have the swarm ability, like every swarm has. Except with the snakes, their bite has a +6 to hit, and it does 2d6 piercing damage at full health, which is an average of 7, or 1d6 piercing damage if it's half health, which is an average of 3 piercing damage. And the target must make a con save, DC 10, or take an additional 4d6 poison damage, which is 14 points of damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful save. Now, I like the swarm of poisonous snakes being in a Yanti temple. It's like a nuisance, a pitfall trap into the poison snakes. I think it's just fun, very fun, I think, for players, and it adds that little bit of danger, I guess. Now, the swarm of Quippers, they have an armor class of, the swarm of Quippers are a CR 1, challenge rating 1, and they have an armor class of 13, hit points of 28. They have a speed of 0, but they have a swim speed of 40. So these Quippers are obviously a aquatic animal. And they have the damage resistance, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, condition immunities to charmed, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, stunned, dark vision of 60 feet, and a past perception of 8. They have the blood frenzy, so when they get advantage on melee rolls against any creature that doesn't have all of its hit points, which is huge. Huge. So all a creature needs to do is be damaged once, and these things are getting advantage on attack rolls. The swarm, once again, the swarm ability occupying the same space. The water breathing, they can swarm and breathe only water. The swarm can only breathe water, which is amazing because these are going to be aquatic. And the bites deal +5 to hit, and it gets 4d6 piercing damage, so an average of 14. Or 2d6 piercing damage, which is an average of 7 if the swarm is at half hit points or lower. I really like all these swarm creatures, if you can't tell. We got 2 more yet to do, and then of course you can make swarms out of whatever you want. I mean, I had a friend use, I'll explain that later, but you have the swarm of rats. The swarm of rats has an AC of 10 and at 24 hit points. Has a movement speed of 30 feet. Once again, same condition resistances and damage resistances and immunities. Dark vision of 30 feet on these guys, and a past perception is 10. They have keen smell, so advantage on perception checks that rely on smell. And they have the swarm ability, like all these swarms do. And that's why these swarms are so versatile, is the swarm ability, like I said earlier on. Actions, the rats can bite with a +2 to hit. And it is 2d6 piercing damage or 1d6 piercing damage, depending on the level of health the swarm has, whether or not it's above half or below half. And the swarm of ravens, they have an armor class of 12, and they have 24 hit points, a flying speed of 10 feet, a walking speed of 10 feet, or a flying speed of 50. They have a +5 to perception checks. They have a passive perception of 15, and once again, the same damage resistances and condition immunities as all the other swarms. Same swarm ability, and they have their beak attack, which is a +4 to hit, and it does 2d6 piercing damage or 1d6 based on the health. Now, the reason why I think swarms are amazing is because you can flavor them so well. Like when Todd walked into this, they were in the sewers, taking care of some Exvarts. Todd walks in the room, and Dustin, the sorcerer, Todd is a ranger, or a Cockroach Ranger, named Kieran, and Dustin is a ASMR sorcerer named Lycos. Now, Lycos walks in and is like, I know he can't see, so... And he lights all the braziers in this room. And as he does, the bats fly towards Todd, engulfing him in the black. I told Todd, I said, and then when he got the bats to half health, I said that he could begin to see Lycos, his friend, off to his right. And that's how I flavored them. I think, personally, that if I was being swarmed by, like, specifically the bats and the ravens, anything with a flying speed and it's swarming in front of me, I would give that character disadvantage on perception checks. That's all I gotta say. That's a homebrew thing that I would do, but, you know, DMs, it's all up to you guys on what you guys want to do, how you want to flavor them. And I just think that swarming is just so cool. Swarms of creatures are just so cool. I mean, the mini for the swarm of bats, the official Wizards of the Coast mini is cool. I like it. Came out, and this is the one that I have, is copyright of 2016. Oh, sorry for that burp, but copyright of 2016. But I just think that it's so cool that these guys are, like, the swarm creatures exist and you can use them. And how would I use swarm creatures? I would use swarm creatures in the same sense that I used them with Todd. I would use them as basically a distraction from the main threat, and basically just like a tank, because they have the resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. I would just use them as, like, the tank, really. Yeah, that's pretty much it with swarming creatures. DMs, have fun. Go use some swarming creatures in your campaign. You can flavor the swarms, make them different. I know in my friend Dustin's campaign, he used the swarm of poisonous snakes, except he had us... Except he made instead of it being poison, instead of it being snakes, there were crabs. Swarm of crabs, and one of his gods in his world takes the form of a crab. So the swarm of crabs would radiate, and like radiant energy. So if you got hit by a crab, you had to make a con save, where the radiant energy would burn at your soul, which was nice and fun, and I really like that. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this, and I'll see you in the next one.